Begin the Quran, Daf Mesech Yevamos Daf Ayin Hey. Begin 3 lines down at the top of the Yomit. The Gemara continues discussing the psukim as they relate to Truma, Meiser, and the laws of Tumah, which was the halacha that we're discussing, the second halacha of our Mishnah. We opened up the Parak Aral. Aral is forbidden in Truma. We also spoke about that in the next category about Tumah, and that's what our Gemara brings the different sources for this halacha that a Tameh is forbidden by Truma. Sheish corresponds because of the Cheskel 20 to the Hachem Shem, which is today's daf. Something that's going to discuss in today's daf are, like I said, the sources regarding a tamei and herb shemesh for truma and kadishim, regarding not only eating but negia. A tamei is prohibited to touch truma. Some of the concepts we can discuss are betzua daka, which means crushed testicles. Krashavcha is the cutting of the male organ, which are different psulim. Zav is someone who has a different discharge from his male organ, depending if it's 2 times, Shabnikim 3 times, we require a carbon. Mechutzi Kippurim is someone who, in his purification process, also has to bring a carbon, what's called atonement, and if he already has tefillah and herb shemesh, but he didn't have an atonement yet, that's called Mechutzi Kippurim. So the Gemara begins on Daf Ayin Hey, 3 lines down at the top of the Yomit. That we have 3 psukim that teach that truma may be eaten after herb shemesh. So that's what the Gemara says, V'tlasa kroi b'truma. 3 psukim that it says by truma. That is, as Rashi brings the psukim as we have them written over here. It says, "B'kadishim lo yochel ad adashayitar," which we already explained that pasuk, although it used the words "b'kadishim," refers to truma. How do we know it's truma? We said this on the previous daf, because it's something that's equal bezari shel Aharon, saying ishish mizera Aharon. What's something that's equal to all zera of Aharon? That's referring to truma, and that's what we're saying that it's in that pasuk, and it's saying that he has to first have his tahara, adashayita. Then we have another pasuk, uva hashemesh v'tahar. And you have a third pasuk that said, ad gimalaysi made tahara by the yeledis, or the woman who gave birth, that she could only eat truma when she purifies it. So it says, why do we need 3 psukim to tell me the halacha that for truma you have to first purify yourself? It says, it's necessary. Why? If you only had the first pasuk of until the person gets purified, I wouldn't know what's considered the fulfillment, the end of the purification. Because obviously we're talking about you need to have a conclusion of the Torah. I wouldn't know what it is. It says, what is that? Oh, because Rahman, so that's what you have in the second pasuk. It says, the setting of the sun is when it becomes purified, which is by herb shemesh. Okay, but because Rahman Shemesh, but I only had this pasuk of Shemesh, I would have thought Hanamil Bar Kapara is someone who is not someone who has to bring a carbon, because as we explained in the previous stuff, this whole pasuk was talking about someone, although it's talking about a tzurua or zav, but we explained this talking about someone that had 2 re'iyas of zav and a mitzvah musger, and the tumas mess, which we're talking about later, and tumas sheretz, which, as we explained in the previous stuff, they don't require carbon. They require shemnikim, they require purification, but not a carbon. Oh, so maybe that's when herb shemesh is enough. Al debar kapara, but when you need an atonement, ademaisi kapara, I would think that maybe for truma also you have to wait until you bring your carbon. Kazakmana, the third pasuk, ad melois. Ad melois, what's that talking about over here? Who's that pasuk going on? That's going on the yeledis. Woman gave birth, who she is a bas kapara, she has to bring a carbon, and still it's saying that she's purified with herb shemesh when the sun sets. Now, that's why you need all 3 pasukim. It says the Gemara, okay, because ad melois. So why do you need all 3? Just go to the last one. Just say the one of the Yeledis, that even though she's a Mechutzi Kippurim, she's allowed to eat Truma after Herb Shemesh, and that's it. You wouldn't need the other 2 psukim. Says the Gemara, no. Havmin, I would have said, even not immersing. Yeah, it's enough. Ad Malais. As long as the days of purification conclude, I don't need a tefillah. So try to write, no, until you are purified, which connotes not just the finishing of the days, that you have to actually go and purify yourself. So therefore, that's why you need to have these 3 psukim. Now the Gemara asks, according to the Tana who disagrees with the Tana of the Bryce of Rabbi Shloimy, Dama that he says, not like we said in the previous time. He says, Bezav bal gimel riyas, u'b'mitzar muchud v'kas madaber. He explains that the pasuk of the mitzayir and the zav is not talking about a zav of 2 discharges. And a mitzvah that was only quarantined. No, it's a mitzvah that was confirmed as a mitzvah and has 3 discharges. And v'hai adasha yitar, and therefore by default he explains when it says in the first pasuk Adash Yitar, means Ademaisi Kapara, until you bring your atonement. So as Rashi explains, obviously that means that Tana explains that when you're talking about B'Kadashim Lo Yoichel, it actually means literally Kadshim. It doesn't mean Truma, because the other pasuk of Abba Hashemesh Vitar tells me that all you need to have is Harab Shemesh, which we explained that pasuk is to my Truma. So, according to that Tana explains this first pasuk of Tzura Zav by bringing atonement. So now we have a different question. So today, Kuroi, 2 psukim of Adash Yitar, meaning this new pasuk we're adding on, according to this Tana that disagrees with the Bryce of Rabbi Shmuel from the previous Daf, and holds that this pasuk to my Kadshim, that you need to wait until you brought your carbon. And the pasuk of V'chipur aleha v'tahedo, that it says by Yeledes, none of these psukim that we have over here, where it says by Yeledes, a different pasuk, that you have, as we said this in the previous Daf, that's how we knew that Mechusik Kippurim needs to have, for Kadashim, actual bringing of the carbon, like we learned by Yeledes. So, for Kadashim, these 2 psukim, lamali. Why do I need 2 psukim to teach me that until you bring atonement, you can't partake of Kadashim? It's necessary. Why? Because Rahman the Yeledes had it only written this halacha of V'chipur aleha v'tahedo, that for someone that's Mechusik Kippurim, you cannot have Kadashim until you bring the carbon. If I would have said it by the woman who gave birth, I would have said Mishum de Meruba Tumasa, because a Yeledis has a lot of Tumah. For 80 days, she cannot eat Truma Kadashim. Oh, so maybe over there, she can't eat until she has her carbon brought. Al Bazav, but by a Zav, I would say that no. He doesn't have to wait till he brings the carbon. It'd be enough with Harav Shemesh. Because he's only Tumah for 7 days. And the other way is also true, because if on the Bazav I don't read my Zav, I would say, there's no exemptions for the halacha of a Zav. Of a Yeledis, by a woman gave birth, I would say no, because a Yeledis is Hutra Mechlala. What do you mean Hutra Mechlala? She could see Dam and be Tar Labala. She has Yimei Tayr. After the days of the Tumah, of the 7 days for the boy and 14 days for the girl, but the rest of the days, that's what's called the Meitava. So there's an exemption to the laws of Tumah that she has, which is for the 80 days. But a Zav has no Hujj Machlala, because as long as he didn't stop, he's going to be Tameh. So Tzricha, so therefore I needed to say by both Yeledis and by Zav, by the other Tumahs, to tell you that for Kadashim, you have to wait until you actually brought your carbon. That's the Gemara just explaining that, just simply because we had explained that these 3 psukim, we were explaining why you need all these 3 for Truma. According to one Manda Amar, which learns this pasuk not on Truma, but learns it on Kadashim, he has to say, Kadashim L'Yechel means real Kadashim, because he explains Tzuru Azav, not as 2 Re'is and Mitzvah Muzgir, rather Mitzvah Muchlat and of Azav Bashalosh Re'is, which is a Mechusik Kippurim, and then we have to wait for your carbon, which is obviously for Kadashim. So that's what we just explained. So what do we do with this pasuk? What do we need it for? We already have a different pasuk by the Yeledis. The Gemara says, oh, you need both. You need by the Zav and by the Yeledis. Now, the Gemara continues now and asks of a pasuk in the Yikra. Pasuk says, the pasuk there is talking about whatever falls from the sherets when they're dead into it, it's going to make it tamei, whatever wooden vessel or garment or leather or sack, anything that you do malacha with it. The pasuk says, b'mayim yuva, it should be brought into water. The tamei ad and it's going to be tamei up until the evening. Now, obviously, we're talking about truma, the fact that you need to have harav shemesh, that you need to have sundown. Question is, says the Gemara Lamali, why do you need this pasuk to tell me that for truma you need harav shemesh? What do you mean? I already brought you the pasuk of v'hashemesh v'tar. So why do I need this pasuk for? So Rabbi Zera opens up a new discussion. He says, you're right, I don't need it. I already have my 3 pasuk I talked about by truma. I already told you the halacha of harav shemesh for truma. This pasuk is l'negia, is for touching. Because as Rashi explains, the previous pasuk was talking about eating. Like it says, v'achar, and afterwards, yochel min hakadoshim, you could eat from the holy things, which is talking about eating, which means from truma. Now this pasuk, however, is talking about vessels, which is regarding touching. And that's what telling you that a vessel, and so to a person that was immersed that day, cannot touch truma. You have to wait till the erev to allow touch. That for touching of truma is also a problem. The time like learning the brisa. It says in the pasuk v'mayim yuva that it should be brought into the water, and v'tameh. Now, if you read it the way it's written, it sounds like that even after it was brought into the water, even after it was tabled in the mikvah, you're calling it tameh. B'mayim yuva v'tameh. It's going to be tameh. Now, yochel akel, you think for everything would be tameh. Tam 11, no, that's what the pasuk says, v'taher. As Rashi points out, it doesn't say v'yitar, it will become tar. Sounds like that it already was tar before sunset. So the question is, Ibetaher, if you only had Vitar, that it is already tar, you would think that it's for everything. Tamalim it says no, but it says Vitamit. It's Tamit till Harav Shemesh. So how do we explain this pasuk? Says the Gemara, it depends. Kan l'maiser. Here, when it says Vitaher, it's going on Maiser Sheni. That after tefillah, person or kli is completely tar. Then there's no problem about touch. Kan the truma. Here in the pasuk when it says Vitame, Ado Erev, it's going on truma. Says maybe I'll say the opposite. Says no, it's logical. Just like the eating of truma is more stringent than the laws of eating meiser. Regarding the laws of touching of truma is more severe than the touching of meiser. And that was the Gemara's answer, that's why you needed that pasuk, not to tell me that the eating of truma has to wait for Harav Shemesh. That I already knew from the 3 pasuk I brought before. This extra pasuk is talking about the touching of truma, that the touching of truma you have to wait till after Harav Shemesh. That's one approach. If you want, you could say that actually negiyah the truma, actually the halacha of touching of truma, that it's forbidden for its full yom, is actually from a different source, Malach Nafka. From here that we learned in a brisa. The pasuk, the brisa quotes, is the pasuk by the Yeled, this woman to give birth. It says, all that time that she has not yet finished her days from post-birth, post-natal, all kaidish she shouldn't touch. It says the brisa azhar la'eichel. This is actually a prohibition of eating. That she should not eat truma as long as she's what's this called tvilas yom arach. For all these many days, she's considered like a long tvil yom. Now, says the brisa, what do you mean? The words of B'chol Kodesh L'Siga. Maybe it means that she shouldn't touch. That's what the pasuk says. No, B'chol Kodesh L'Siga. Read the rest of the pasuk, and it says V'lamikdash L'Sabeh. So it says the kashim she shouldn't touch, and she shouldn't enter into the base of mikdash. It says the brisa Makash Kodesh L'Mikdash. So we're comparing the kashim to the base of mikdash, which is Ma Mikdash, just like whoever comes into the base of mikdash in the state of tumah is a davar sheish ben netilas neshama. It's meant to take away his life. Because the punishment of karas, like it says, oh, af kodesh, it must mean the comparative eating related to the kachim, must be davashish by netilas neshama, has to be something that a person would lose his life on that. Now, in the gear regarding touching netilas neshama leka, there's no losing of one's life. So obviously, we're talking about eating in a state of tumah, which by kachim that's also by karas. Because someone who eats truma in the state of tumah gets death, like it says in Mikvah Beis, meisu b'kei chalaluhu. So wait a second. So so why are we saying B'chol Kodesh L'Siga if you tell me it means eating, as you tell me from the Hekesh? This is what we're saying. Negiyah ka'achil. All we want to say is that touching is like eating, meaning whoever is forbidden to eat, which is a tummy person, is forbidden to touch. Not that there's going to be a punishment of karas. Touching does not have a punishment of karas, and the person is not really talking about touching. It's about eating, because it's similar to Vel HaMikdash, which is karas. This also has to be karas, which is the eating. But, so why we say L'Siga, just to tell you that whoever cannot eat, cannot touch, which is the prohibition of a tummy person to touch. That's the source for touching truma in the state of tumah as a tzvul yam. So we have two sources, the halacha, of how we see that it's forbidden for a tummy person to touch truma. Now says the Gemara, going back to the halacha of our Mishnah, we said in the Mishnah that B'tzua Daka B'chulu, someone who is a B'tzua Daka, he had crushed testicles, etc., that such a person is forbidden to the certain halachas that we spoke about regarding a B'tzua Daka. Now the Gemara wonders, we said in the Mishnah that Hein V'Avdeyan, said them and their slaves, they're allowed to eat, because that's just a personal affliction, it doesn't affect the status of a kohen, there's nothing wrong with him as a kohen, and his kinyan kaspe is avid kadosi. We said, but b'neshein lo yechel, we said that their wives cannot eat. Why? Because we said that psulim lo v'bakal, and if a woman, the wife, has relations, that's nivel l'pasala. And nivel l'pasala actually invalidates the wives. Now, but our Mishnah said further, vim lo yada, if he was not intimate with her, after he became a P'tzua Daka, then we said they could eat. Why? Even though they're married and she's anticipating a beer with him, still, until you had the beer P'sula, that's not going to validate the wife from eating Truma. That's what it said in the Mishnah. That's what the Gemara asked. Mantana. Who's the Tana of the Mishnah? The whole Mishnah Meres lebi P'sula deiraisa. When you're anticipating a prohibited biblical intimate act, still achla you could eat, because that's essentially what the wife is. The wife is waiting, they just didn't have, but she's married and she's being mishtaberes for such a b'psula. Who's the one who holds that that's not an invalidating factor? So Rabbi Los, this is b'machlekes shnoi. There's a machlekes tanoim which we brought on Daf Yomi Beis and Pergabol Yevimtoi. We had Almon L'Kohen Gadol and the Gerusha L'Chutz Kohen Hedjed. We said that if they're widowed, if they're from engagement, if they were just engaged, the Tanakh held they cannot eat truma. Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon held that they're able to. That's so different, says the Gemara. So Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon, because they hold that even though you're anticipating you're engaged, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you didn't have the B'Ib Sula, that doesn't invalidate you. Tanakh may held, no, you are puzzled. So seemingly the Tana of our Mishnah is Rabbi Elazar B'Shimon. But Rabbi Shloimy says, no, I felt Rabbi Meir. You can even say it's going like Rabbi Meir. Why? Shani Hachi here it's different. Shikvar Achla. It's not stop like a woman who's engaged, who's waiting for the B'Ib Sula. You already were married, you already were eating the Truma. So once you're already eating the Truma, then we let you continue. But if you never ate yet, then maybe you're right. Maybe that's Remeir's halacha, that you wouldn't let you start eating because Mishtames L'B'Ib Sula. But even if you Mishtames L'B'Ib Sula, but if you already ate once before, maybe Remeir would agree that you let it continue eating, and if he could be the Tana by Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar, the Amoy Rabbi Elazar, who did not say that the Tana Mishnah could be like Remeir, why didn't he say like Rabbi Yechanan? He says, no, Shekvar Achla, we don't say this svara, oh, you already ate. Why? Because if you don't say this, then what are you going to do with a Basa Social? This is the Kohen. A regular Jewish woman is married to a Kohen. What makes Bala, her husband dies? Teichel, she should continue eating Shekvar Achla because you already ate. You don't say that. So you see that you don't say Shekvar Achla. Rabbi Yechanan tell you, no, you can't compare the two. Husband over there, when her husband dies, Paka Kinyane. His acquisition her has been removed because he's dead. Doesn't remove the kinyan that he has now, they're still married, and therefore since she already ate, she can continue eating because the she's kinyan cast by the husband, and we're not going to say Mishtamesh L'B'Sulo as an invalidation only if you never ate. But if you already ate, then we won't say that, and therefore Rabbi Yechanan disagreed and said you could even be like Remeir. Now we said in the Mishnah, qualifying said Ezehu P'tzua. We said who is a P'tzua Daka? So the Mishnah said Kol Shenifzu Beitzim Shaloi. Whenever you have that the testicles were crushed, and the Mishnah said Afila Achas Man. Even one of there's two testicles, even if one of them gets crushed, that's going to make the individual the P'tzua Daka with all the halachas that we mentioned in the Mishnah. Now, turn about one of the Brayos elaborates on this halacha. Is there P'tzua Daka? What's a P'tzua Daka? So it's Kol Sheniftu. It's anyone who has a wound from a sword or a knife in Beitzim Shalai, in his testicles. Even one of them. And Mefila Nikfu, even let's say it wasn't crushed, but let's say it was punctured. Or Mefila Nimaiku, even if it was dissolved or because it shrunk because of the wound. Or Mefila Chistru, even if it just was missing all a minute amount, that would already make the individual into P'tzua Daka. Now, Amir B'Shmal B'nei Shabbi Yechon B'Reiki says, Shemati, I heard, from the mouth of the sages, B'Kerem B'Yavna. Why is it called the vineyard in Yavna? Because they used to sit in rows like a vineyard that's planted in the way those rows are. And I heard, Kol she'ein le'labela achas, if someone only has one testicle, ein l'sris chama, he's only a natural eunuch, in other words, someone who's born that way, kosher, and he's going to be valid. It's not going to be considered as a P'tzua Daka. Says first of all, what's Sris Chama Sakataitich? Sris Chama is someone that, through natural means, through an illness, he becomes this condition. But here, this person didn't get ill if he only has one testicle. So why are you saying he's a Sris Chama? So it says the Gemara, Ella Harehu Kis Sris Chama. What we all we meant to say was that just like a Sris Chama is going to be permitted because the Torah only says forbidden only if it's B'Tzua or Dach or Karas, only if it's crushed or cut or some type of an injury. Here, where he wasn't injured, he just has one testicle. he would be eligible to marry the Klal Yisrael, just like Esther Chama, who, although he's also not capable of having children, but since it was not through an injury, wasn't b'dei Adam, it was b'dei Shemayim, it's going to be kosher. You see, it's not necessarily dependent on the facts, it would be dependent on the fact it has to fit into the category of the way the Torah said it, and therefore that would be okay with this person who only has one testicle. Says the Gemara, the Nikiv, is that really so? That someone who has a puncture, you told me in the Brisa that's one of the cases that Loi Moili is not going to have a child? Because that's the psul of the B'tzua Daka. But Vahu Gav, there was a certain person, the Sulka Dikli, he was climbing up on the palm tree as you can see in the base. But Charze Silva Bebeitzim, and he had an occupational hazard. He punctured with a thorn one of his testicles. V'nafik minei, and it oozed out semen, kachut de mugla, like this type of mucus, this type of, and even so, v'oilet, he gave birth afterwards. So you see, he was punctured his testicle and he was able to have a child. So why you tell me that puncture would qualify him as a B'tzua Daka? He says, what do you mean? Shmuel committed the Rab. Actually, Shmuel said with the Rab, he said to him, Seba Chazal Bana Ma'ayim, go and after his sons to see where they actually from, because actually his wife was actually committed adultery, because actually it's not possible for him to have a child. So actually, because it does make him into B'tzua Daka. Now, Rabbi Shloimy says, B'tzua Daka b'dei Shemayim. If someone becomes a B'tzua Daka through natural means, meaning let's say through thunder or hail, or let's say congenital, like he's born from the womb that way, he comes out with crushed testicles, but it wasn't through an injury, kasher is going to be kasher. And Amar Rava, he says, Hain Karina Putzua. That's why it says in the Torah, Putzua, but Karina Hapatzua. Because had it written Hapatzua, the crushed one, it would have sounded like the one that was originally, and was born like that. No, it's not Hapatzua, the one, it's Putzua Daka, someone who, more like a verb, the one who gets his testicles crushed. But if it was born like that, from the womb, then that would not be a problem. Additionally, b'masnidatan in the Brisa we learned, Nemaloyova B'tzua, it says that the B'tzua should not come into the cow, marry a Jewish woman. But then it says the pasuk afterwards, Loyova a mamzer, illegitimate child should not come into the cow. So it's comparing the two of them. Malahalam the other, just like a mamzer obviously is through natural means, it's only through an illegitimate marriage that creates a mamzer. Akam b'nei adam, so over here, the B'tzua, the crushed, is only if it's through human intervention, not natural means. Now, Amar Rabba, he says that this halacha B'tzua of wounded, of crushed, is actually b'kulam. Although the Torah says it by daka, but it's actually in the beitzim, what's called the testicles. It's in the gid, which is the male member. It's also the chute beitzim, which are the cords of the testicles, which is what the beitzim hang from, inside the kiss, inside the scrotum. All those things, the halacha B'tzua would apply to. All those genital organs. So to dach, the halacha of crushed, is also b'kulam, and cutters of severed, of cut, is also b'kulam, is also in all these things. As the Gemara explains, little seemingly redundant, but it goes through all three for all three. B'tzua, b'kulam, crushed by all of them, bench and niftzagid, whether the male organ gets crushed, bench and niftzabeitzim, whether the testicles get crushed, bench and niftzabeitzim, whether the strings of the beitzim get cut, get crushed. So to dach b'kulam. So the niftu is more like wounded, dach is more like crushed. Dach b'kulam is bench and nidach agid, bench and nitchu beitzim, and bench and nitchu beitzim. Again, all those three apply by dach. And also karas b'kulam, severed is also by all three. Bench and nirchas agid, bench and nirchas beitzim, bench and nirchas beitzim, all those three would apply by being severed. Now the Gemara asks in general a question on this whole halacha of this pasuk. Amalei ha'humer rabban l'rava. One of the rabbis asked Rabbi, says, Memaydai B'tzua Daka, who said that B'tzua Daka, again, B'tzua and Dach are both terms of really wounding and crushing. Who said it's Ba'isa Makim, it's in that place? Maybe it's from his head. Maybe someone has a wound or crush on his head, that maybe that's what it means he can't be Yova Bakal, Hashem. Who says that to do with the male organ? Amalei said to him, no. From the fact that the Torah doesn't mention anything about Der Shlishi, Der Asiri, like it says by Mamzer or Amoidim or Avi in the Mitzri, it says how long is the limitation of not coming Mikal Hashem. It doesn't say anything about future generations. Shema Min Abayis Malkum. Obviously, it's because he can't have children. It's in the male organ. And that's his psul. That's why it doesn't talk about future generations. Says Zima, what are you talking about? Maybe the reason why it doesn't mention generation, because because only he's prohibited. But but his son and his grandson are actually kosher. That's why it doesn't say anything. How do you see he doesn't have children? Maybe Taka means a klap and cup. So the Gemara says no, because Dumi the Kresh Shafcha. You're right. Pitzu and Daka doesn't really tell us anything. But the third one that it mentions is Kresh Shafcha. Now, Ma Kresh Shafcha, just like that third psul of Kresh Shafcha, which means the cutting of that which spills, is Ba'isam Malkum in that place. Therefore, also Pitzu and Daka is also in that place. Says the Gemara, Kresh Shafcha Guvin my Daisam Malkum. Who said that Kresh Shafcha means in that place? A mitzvah say maybe it means from his lips, like Rashi explains, which that the spittle pours out. Who said it's the male organ? So it's going to know because Kreis Shavchiksiv, it says the spiller, which is b'makom sheshayfich, in the place where it spills. A mouth doesn't pour; it actually sprays at a distance. The way it comes out of the male organ, it generally sprays with whichever tract it's coming from, the seminal tract or the urinary tract. It sprays, so it doesn't pour. The mouth, the mouth doesn't. Sorry, so he's actually not saying that. Actually, it says that the mouth doesn't pour. Actually, he spits to a distance. Sounds like that that the shayfich is the spiller. That's only by the male organ. Yeah, what's the pshat in that? It says the mouth doesn't pour, it spits. It sprays to a distance.
You have to put force into it
to spit.
To spit.
And versus by the male organ.
And after it gets that injured, it spills.
By the mouth, it won't. If it gets injured, it won't spill out.
Yeah, you have to do an action
to do that. Okay. So it says ve'emachayt. Maybe say it's from the nose. It also pours out. It says miksiv b'shveich. Does it say kadus b'shveich, meaning from a place where it normally pours out before that? What does that mean? Meaning, like what you were saying, mishalik the krisa, if through the injury, then shayfich, then it dribbles out. But shaloyal de krisa, if it's not cut, ain't a shayfich, it does not pour out. Rather it spouts. That excludes the nose, the idi. Before it's cut and after it's cut, shayfich, it always just drips out. The nose always drips out. The mouth, it sounds like it's not shayfich. It would have to be. You have to spit at a distance, even after it's cut. And the male organ, through the kreis, through the cutting, then it's shayfich. Then it's that excludes the mouth or the nose, because they're not going to be different before and after the cutting. It's only the male organ that would be, and that's how we know kreis shavcha means the male organ, and therefore pitzu and dak is also by the male organ. Now Mesnita Tanam, in the Brayso we learned what we said. That Nimala Yoba Pitzu Dak. It says that a Pitzu Dak should not be Yoba Bakal, but Nimala Yoba Mam says a Mam should not be Yoba Bakal. Now Malam, just like the Mamza is Ba'isay Makim, so they have an interesting limud. They're comparing that just like a Mamza is from that place, what makes this person into a Mamza is from the relations that the parents had. So too over here, the Pitzu Dak is also Ba'isay Makim. That's how the Brayso learns it out, that is going on these things. Now, the Gemara qualifies, now anatomically speaking, specifics regarding the psul. So, nikev, so we said that the halacha, let's say punctured, is on all three. Now, let's say nikev lamata me'atara. Let's say there's a hole beneath, which means towards the ground of the atara. Now, the atara, the way Rashi says at least, is a heightened row that goes around the circumference of the male organ. So at the end of the organ, towards the ground, and the hole that's punctured goes on a diagonal. Tais actually says, if you understand the male organ, which I was running late coming from a bris, you see the scala atura, right? And what you see is that the male organ at the end is actually shaped in a way that even if a hole would be straight, not on the diagonal, part of it could be above and part of it could be beneath. Again, depends how you learn what the atar is. But the tip of the male organ, because again, depends what we're calling flesh and what we're calling the gid. It could be, part of it could be within the edge, and part of it, because the bottom is different than the top. So according to Taisa, it could even be a straight hole. But be that as it may, if there's a hole beneath the atara, but then it goes on the diagonal, it comes at shekeneged in the opposite side, lemala me'atar. Above the atar, meaning towards the body. So part of the whole one side is beneath, meaning towards the ground. Another one is above the atara, towards the person's body. So he thought to validate such a person. Why? Since both ends of the hole are not above the atara, because Rashi explains very importantly, whatever is beneath the atara, meaning away from the body towards the ground, that's called basar ba'alma. That's just flesh. As the Mishnah taught that if you have any part of the atara left over, even that of a thread, it's going to be okay, because whatever's beyond the atara is not considered part of the gid. It's just basar ba'alma. It's not the main criterion for the gid. So he thought to say it's going to be kosher, because both holes are not above the atara. Amli Rabasi says, Nahacham Reb Shmuel Levi says, atara, that since the hole goes through the entire surface of the atara from inside, even if the hole is kolshi, even the minute amount is going to be ma'keves, it's going to hold back the ability to have a child, and therefore it's going to be possible, even though both sides of the hole are not above the atara, but since it goes through and it comes out, a minute amount is above the atara, then that's going to be a psul of this krei shafcha. Now the Mishnah said, "V'im nishtar ma'atar b'chul." We said if any part of the atara is left over, even minute amount, so then it's going to be kosher. Now Yosef Ravina was sitting and was asking the following question: Maloi hachut sha'amru this that they said as long as you have a threads amount of the atara, is that up in a kula? Is that on the entire surface of the atara, the entire circumference? Or is it enough on the majority? So Amalei Rabbi Toisfol Ravin. It says Maloi hachut al panei ruba, which actually interesting. The Vilna Gaon brings a girsa from the Rosh, actually up in a kula. But our girsa, at least the way Rashi has it, is as long as you have a hair's breadth along the majority, collaboration. But a very important thing, it has to be towards his body, that you'll have left over that as a hair's breadth on the majority of the circumference of the atara. But if let's say it got cut off towards the body, and you have a little bit left of a hair's breadth from the atara on the circumference of the gid on the side towards the ground, that would be possible. It has to be whatever you have left over, that little bit has to be towards the body, not towards the ground. Now, another interesting discussion, he says, kukulmas. Let's say someone's male organ was cut like a quill, which is, the way a quill is made, is that you cut the point on the diagonal to be able to write with it. That's how a quill ends on like a triangle. So if his organ is cut like a kulmas, he's going to be ksheira. But kamarziv, if let's say his male organ is like a gutter, which means it's carved out like a gutter, where you have the walls on the two sides, but in the middle is carved out like a pipe, psula, that's going to be invalid. What's the reason for this? So the Gemara says, when it's like a pipe, sholad ba'avira. What happens is that the air could get into the walls, meaning the interior, and it cools off the gid inside, so therefore the semen is not going to be able to create a child. Whereas v'hai, when it's shaped like a kulmas, like a quill, the airspace does not get into the gid, so the zer can be misbashal when it gets heated up appropriately, and be able to have a child. That's the opinion of Rav Huna. The thing is, Rav Chizdami says the exact opposite. He says no, kamarzev, when it's like a gutter, sure, it's going to be valid. Almost like a quill, it's going to be psul, it's going to be invalid. So he explains also why. He says, when it's like a gutter, it's going to draw the semen from the body during intimacy, and it's going to be able to seminate a child. Why? Because the gid is not missing anything from its thickness. So what? So it's touching the size of the vagina, and it's getting heated up. And therefore it could bring forth and shoot forth like an arrow. So that could create a child. But Bahai, when it's like a quill, since it's missing from the thickness, so it's not touching the walls of the rechem, so like guarded. So it's not going to draw the semen because it's not going to get heated up so much, and then it's not going to draw from the body with a flow, it's just going to drip, as if it's not going to be mazuriyah. Now, Amar Rabbi says, it's logical to say like Rav Huna, that when it's like a kulmas, like a kul, it's going to be kosher, but like a gutter, it's going to be possible. And he says the same story, he says why? Hi, when it's like a kulmas, we said the ear is not getting to the interior to affect the reproductive organ. But when it's like a gutter, the airspace is going to get in, it's going to cool down the semen, it's not going to be able to have the potency. Now, what do you do with Rav Chiz's svar, even Mishum Grei Dusa? What do you do with the fact that it has to be able to hit the walls of the rechem to be able to draw it? He says, that's not difficult. He says, it's just like a spigot of a barrel, which is narrow and thin in the front, and it doesn't touch the walls of the hole of the barrel in front of it. But when you stick it in until the wide part, then it's going to touch. Same thing over here. Even though the point of the male organ that's touching in the front is not going to hit the walls, it's going to heat up because of the rear of the male organ, which is going to touch in the back. That's still wide, therefore that will be meschamim, and therefore that will create a child. Now, Amalei Rabin Lamer, he says, Papa, and the Hilchas halacha is, whether like a quill, whether it's like a gutter chair, it's going to be kosher. But the question they did have was, but if the cut is lamata matar, if it's, are we talking about where it's cut beneath the atar, the corona, or lamala, or above, meaning on the gid part? Says Pshita, obviously the lamala matar, obviously we're talking about where it's cut above the atar. Meaning this whole discussion we're talking about where it's cut like a quill or cut like a gutter must be talking about towards the body part, above the atar. Because if you think we're talking about beneath the adara, even if the whole male organ over there was cut off, would also be okay, because we learned in the Mishnah, if you have left over from the atara, even that of a hair's breadth is going to be kosher, even though everything beyond the atara and beneath was cut off. So you can't be telling me that the discussion of like a kulmis or like a marzer was beneath the atara, it must be above the atara. And actually, Gemara says, Veravina, the truth is, l'shabushi l'merema hudabayit. He was actually just testing to see if he's going to realize what he's asking, but obviously, he didn't have such a shayla. So it was obviously not lamata matar, it must be lamala matar. Now, the Gemara brings a story, who ovdid the habib Moshe Machasi. There was a story in Moshe Machasi where someone had his male organ like a marzer, like a gutter. So, Shafir Mabar Abashi, what Mabar Abashi did is that he cut the flesh on all sides. So he took away the walls of the gutter and he made it kukumas, like a quill. He chiseled it down. And then he validated, meaning, like Rashi points out, obviously he held like Rav Huna, that only if it's like a kulmis is going to be kosher. So he didn't want it to be like a marziv. So he did some type of cosmetic surgery to make it like a quill by chiseling it down, and then he validated like that. Now there's a story in Pabadisa, the Estotim Gufsa. The tube got clogged up, the shichva zera. There's a hole that it's fit for a person to release his seed from. That pipe got clogged up, and what happened was va'apik, and that his carry was coming out b'makom ketanim, what we call ketanim, which is where the urine is from, comes out. So where the urine comes out, that's where his semen was coming out from, because the Brisa teaches Masechet B'chayes on the Dalman Beis that there's two holes in the person. One releases the urine, and one releases the semen. And between them is like a membrane, this like as thin as a peel of a garlic. And it's supposed to come out from different pipes. And what happened was that the pipe of the semen got clogged up, that now was coming back through the hole of the urine instead of through that pipe. Now the Chazon Ish famously says that obviously Nishtan Ateva, because we don't have this, but as it comes through the same area. Al-Kabbalah, in Talmudic times, that was the Metzias, that they had two different places. And some Rabbi Babai left sure he thought to validate this person, because it's not Petzua, it's not dach, it's not crushed, not wounded, it's not crushed, not cut off. So though, yes, his semen was coming through where his urine is supposed to come from, but okay, it's not Petzua, it's not dach, it's not crushed. But Rav Papi says, what do you mean? Because they come, as the Gemara continues to talk about, they come from either a cursed or a cut off people from the house of Eli. So the Gemara says in the first parak of Rosh Hashanah on Daf Yomi that Abai and Rabba who came from the house of Eli, that's why we call them a Maloi, because they wouldn't live a long life, because Eli had this klala that his children are going to die young. So Amiti Milu Milyas. So therefore you say truncated teachings. Meaning, how can you say that? The semen only gets ripened, and it could fulfill a child only in its place, from its pipe. Not in its place, it's not going to be able to produce a child, and therefore, he said that this person will be considered as a pasul. He is in the category of P'sul Daka and the Kureshafcha, where the whole rationale of that psul is that you can have children. And this person also cannot have children because they're coming through the wrong track, and therefore, he said he should be in that. Thank you for any time.